To the NOFC podcast. My name is Jay. Episode 36 is where we're at. The title of the episode is Struggle, Courage, and Perseverance. It's the Amanda Reif story. Typically, what I like to do is to give a thorough introduction of my guest or what information I know of them. But in this case, I think because of your story, your whole story means a lot, not just the one particular event, because there's so much more to you than that one particular event, which self-admittedly I never knew. And I feel it's appropriate to apologize for that for some reason. And I think this is one of the reasons I do this, is for people like you who, like, on paper you had one incident that put you in a position, but people don't know the other struggles that you have gone through and have been going through since that event. So I want to dive right into that, Amanda. First of all, thank you for being on the show. And if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about Amanda, your childhood, and what got you interested into law enforcement, if you don't mind.
Okay. So I was basically born and raised in St. Lawrence County in the Canton area. My parents are both from here. I went to the local high school, Edwards Knox, until I was like in sixth grade. And then my dad was a state forest ranger. And when he came on the job, he was stationed downstate. So we followed him. And I ended up at three different high schools before I ended up back in the North Country. Um, I finished my junior and senior year here. Um, for as long as I could remember, I wanted to be in law enforcement. I was told that when I was in kindergarten, a trooper came and spoke to the class, and ever since then, that's what I had wanted to do. So um, that's what I did. I went to high school. When I graduated, I went to Utica College of Syracuse University. I took economic crime investigation. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. I did my internship. It was a paid internship at Sprint PCS in Kansas City. I was there for like a year. I got engaged. I had come home, and that's how I ended up back in the North Country. So,
So let's rewind real quick, because you blazed over that, and that's fine. But so rewinding back to your childhood, starting there, where that's one of the first impressions you got when a trooper came to your classroom. Do you have any other law enforcement in your family, police officers?
so my dad is a retired New York State Forest Ranger. He
Okay.
retired as a lieutenant.
Mhm.
He didn't start that job until I was like fourth grade, I believe. Um, But I mean, I'm a daddy's girl, and not in the princess type of way. My dad never treated me like I was a little princess, but him and I are two peas in a pod. So I've always looked up to him. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a Marine that was shot overseas. Um, he had a pretty harrowing time as well. Um, so that, I mean, I've always known that when he had a metal rod in his leg for 20 years. And when he had that removed, I was 8 years old, and I got to stay home from school and take care of him because he was laid up on the couch. Um, my uncle was the chief of police in the local police department here, but yeah, I don't know that there was any other outside. I mean, they're pretty much it, just the two of them.
Okay. And as far as siblings, you have siblings growing up as well?
I do. I have a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay, so you're the oldest of three. Um,
Yes.
so you so now we'll go back to current times. You you get married, and what year was this?
I got married in August of 2002, and then I left less than a month later for the academy. I started the academy in September 2002,
All right,
187th.
187. So and once I think you graduate and you return to your hometown for being assigned, correct, out of
Yes, I
FTL.
mean, yeah, I never went anywhere else. I live in the town of Pierpont, but my mailing address is Canton. It's 10 miles from my house. I put in for that station. I came home, I went right to Canton, and I never worked anywhere else. I kind of wish I had. Canton was a great station. It was zone headquarters, but they referred to it as a retirement station. We weren't busy like some of the other stations were. So I had
Fair
a
enough.
really easy career for 5 years.
So perfect. Walk me through your first 5 years. Walk me through you as a trooper. What did you like? What did you dislike? Is there something that you excelled at, or did you have goals, aspirations in regards to specialty units or going up in the ranks? Any of those things?
I had always planned on doing a 25-year career. I would have liked to gone into the investigative side of it. That was my goal then. Um, Canton didn't have a lot. I mean, I was a good ticket writer. I got my tickets. We didn't have a ton of complaints. When I say I had it easy, I never had a fatal accident. I never had a homicide. All the fatals seemed to happen when my shift was over or before it started or on my past days. Um, I mean, we had didn't have like serious child abuse that I handled. It just I don't. It just turned out I just had a very easy time of it. So,
So it's very interesting, especially the way you describe it, because so that's the first 5 years. That leads up to the event, right? Correct? On what
yes.
happened in your event. So I mean, probably based on your description, a little bit less experienced than the average trooper. Could you would you would you agree with that
Absolutely.
assertion?
Absolutely. Yep.
So before there's a man, this is even more interesting than I thought it would be. So before we get so more involved into that aspect of it, so walk me through the day of the event. The day, what day is it? What importance of that day is that hold to you? And then just walk me through that day. And please, if I interrupt you, it's only to ask specific questions. So bear with me.
Yep. Yeah. So it was the day after Father's Day. I'm actually a Father's Day baby. I was born on Father's Day. It was a Monday, June 18th, which was my 29th birthday. And I was actually supposed to work a two shift. And one of the senior troopers preferred working the midnight shifts. And she asked me to switch, knowing it was my birthday. She said, you can go out to dinner with your husband. At the time, my son was 8 months old. I'd been back to work like 6 months after I'd had him. Um, and it was just a regular day. I started my one shift. I had to go to a training for domestics. It was about if another police officer was involved in a domestic. I did that in the morning. I did, patrolled all day. I responded to another domestic call in Norwood. It was off my post. It was two brothers arguing over a shirt. So I got there as backup, and there was no need for me to be there. I left. The other troopers took care of it. In about 4 o'clock, I was sent to a dog bite complaint. And the dog bite complaint actually came in through the St. Lawrence County Sheriff's Department, and they were tied up, had nobody available, so I took it. And I called out at the hospital because I had already looked for the complainant and couldn't find them where they were supposed to be. So I went to the hospital to get more information. And it was just pulling into the hospital, and they called Trooper Caldwell, who was actually my senior man, and told him to start heading towards an address on 56 in Potsdam and to call the station for more information. So this is 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago, and we didn't have the computers in the car where they gave the complaints. So they usually gave the complaints over the radio. So telling him to call in was odd. Usually we did that when, when you
Yep.
couldn't put stuff out over the air.
Yep.
So I called in and I said to the dispatcher that answered, which was the sheriff's dispatcher, because in Canton at the time, like I said, we were a zone headquarters, but we had our own ComSpec, the 911 operator, and the sheriff's department operator were all in the same building, and they all worked together in the same room. Um, and just a little off topic. So the North Country is big, but everybody knows each other. I mean, there's all these little things where you know people all tied in. So the two operators that were in there that day, the 911 operator, my dad and her dad had worked in the woods together. Our families had been close when we were growing up. Um, we were good friends. And for the duration of my pregnancy, when I was off the road, I worked the desk. So every Monday night, I sat in the room with these two women that were working. So we'd become very close. Tammy answers the phone. I said, "Hey, I heard you just sent Ray somewhere. What's going on? I just pulled into the hospital." And she told me that a woman had called in. Her boyfriend had pushed her. Um, but she thought he was going to get a gun. And I said, "All right, well, I'm right here. I'll just head over there." The There was a trooper working our desk. The comm specs were gone for the day, so there was a trooper working our desk. It was her last day of work. She was retiring, right? So I start heading towards the address. It's literally 2 minutes, 2 miles outside of the village of Potsdam. I get there and I called out of service, and they had told her, the 911 operator Jen had told the complainant, just get out of the house but leave the phone off the hook, keep the phone line open. So he apparently also had a scanner. So when I pulled up, I called out of service, and she had left the house. I didn't know that at the
Hey,
time.
real quick, is there any that you know of at the time that you go to this call? Is there any previous contact with these suspects or the complainant, either one?
I had never had any contact with either one of them.
Okay.
He had had contact with multiple police agencies throughout his life.
But you rolling
Um,
into this, it's a call that you have no predetermined thought process on it other than it's just a call. Like you've never dealt with these people before.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Um, nope, that's okay. So I pull up to the house, and it's just a little one-story ranch house. And at this section, it's outside of the village, but the houses are somewhat close together. Generally, in the rural area, you would pull into the driveway or what have you, but here I didn't. I pulled ahead of the house, kind of diagonal to it, and I walked diagonally across the yard. There was a big bay window on the front. There was the door with a set of steps, and then there was a garage door to the left hand side. And I walked up and I stood on the ground. There's a storm door that opened one way, and the interior door opened opposite. And I opened the exterior door, and I knocked on the interior door, and I announced myself. And I could hear yelling, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. So I knocked again. I said it again: "State police, I need to talk to you." And the inside door is a full glass door with a lace curtain on it. And as I knocked the second time, announced myself, and I saw the barrel of a gun move the lace curtain and shot me. It was that fast. Um,
So you had no time to process from the time it's like a all at once that curtain moved, you see the gun, and then next thing you know, do you
I,
hear do you hear it as well, or is it
um,
instantaneous?
it's instantaneous. Like, there was no time. Like, I had no time to react whatsoever. It blew me backwards into the flower garden that was right up against the house. Um, and then he proceeded to break the glass out with the barrel of the gun. And I'm laying on my back. He broke the glass out with the barrel of the gun and then stepped out through the door and pointed a gun at me. And I remember telling him, "Don't you shoot me. Don't you shoot me again."
Does he say
And,
is he does he say anything to you at all from the
I
time you
don't
knock on the door until where we are now?
no, I don't remember him speaking to me necessarily. I mean,
Yep.
he very well could have.
Right.
Um, he was yelling something inside when I knocked on the door, but it was muffled and I couldn't hear what he said.
Yep.
But he stood over me again and So it's like slow motion. You know how like in the movies, everything they slow it down. Well, that's how it was. So he steps out. I tell him, don't shoot me again. My son was 8 months old at the time. And I remember thinking, you can't kill me. I have a baby at home. And I remember also thinking at the same time, you can't say that because when you say that in the movies, they shoot you again. So I don't know if I said it or if I just thought it. But then he went back inside the house, and I knew the big bay window was over my shoulder, and I didn't want him to shoot me out the window. So I dragged myself up against the house. So at that time, I tried to reach for my radio and I couldn't reach it. It was on my left hip, which I got shot in the left shoulder. Um, I couldn't reach it. I didn't have the cord where it came up to my shoulder. I pulled myself up to the house and I was finally able to get to my radio and I called into Canton that I had been shot. And
So
they
real
didn't
quick, so real quick, Amanda. So two things. Did you know? You said it was a long gun or a rifle. Did you know what type of gun it was at that moment? Like, was it a shotgun? And did you know
no,
that? No.
I didn't know any of it. I just knew that I had been shot. Later I found out I was shot with a 50 caliber black powder rifle and it had been double loaded. So I actually had two holes in my chest, not just one. Yeah.
And at what point? That's crazy, by the way. At what point from the time that you realize that you're hit does it take for you to actually feel any sensation of like, holy shit, I'm feeling this now? Is there a lapse in time or is that almost immediate as well?
I don't remember feeling pain until after the entire incident was over.
But
So,
you did know because you realized that you were shot in the shoulder because when you tried to make that initial call, you realized that arm was somewhat incapacitated.
right, I couldn't move my arm, I couldn't use it. I had to use my right arm to drag me back up against the house. Um, so yeah, like I knew I'd been shot, I'd heard it, heard the gunshot. It had knocked me backwards. Um, but I didn't feel any pain that I remember.
Okay.
I
So
know
then,
that they said on the so they okay, so the radio when I called in,
yep.
the radio didn't they never got the transmission. But they knew I had been shot because the 911 operator had told her to leave the phone off the hook. So they heard the gunshot and they heard me yell. Um, the scanner actually picked up my radio transmission and they heard that through the phone line.
Okay. So you get up, you make that call that obviously it wasn't heard through the radio, but the scanner picked it up and they probably heard it over the phone. So then what transpires after this? They're probably sending everybody out there.
So when the call had come in and the complaint had said that they thought that he was getting a gun, they had called the 911 operator called the local PD, Potsdam PD, which, like I said, is just a couple miles outside from where I was. So there was already two PD guys on the way. Um, they would have shown up literally minutes after I was shot. When they got on scene, they couldn't see me. They didn't know where I was. And he came out of the house. Um, and in that, from when he went back into the house to the time that they showed up, they're pretty sure that I probably passed out because I don't remember him coming back out the second time. So Um, they show up, they're ordering him to get on the ground. He's not getting on the ground. He'd start to, and I don't know if either one of those patrol officers had ever dealt with him, but their department had. Another trooper shows up and takes over. He's yelling commands at the guy. He's telling him he's not going to talk to the PD, but he'll talk to the trooper. He was kind of taunting them, like, "Oh, she's over there. Sorry, I shot your trooper. You know, fuck you. I'm not talking to you. You put your guns down." So he would start to get down, and then he was getting up, and he'd start to get down, but he wasn't complying. I remember hearing command voices. You know, like we go through the academy and they're yelling at us all the time and telling you know, that loud, do what I'm telling you to do voice. I
Yep.
do not know what they were saying to him. I just remember hearing a command voice. Um, and over and over again. And this takes literally no time at all. I showed up on scene at like 3:23. I was shot at 3:25. I shot him a couple minutes. Well, I guess I got ahead of myself, but
That's okay.
it's very short amount of time. So I could hear the command voice. I was able to drag myself to a sitting position up against the house. I sat up, I drew my weapon, and I shot him in the back. And he fell to the ground instantaneously. We had just upgraded from the 9 millimeters to the 45s. I'd had it a month. I had just qualified in May. So,
um, Slight bit of a rewind regarding your actual injury. Although this pain doesn't set in until significantly later, is there any was there a lot of blood or not much at all? Because it was a black powder rifle, probably not much. Do you remember that portion of it?
I couldn't see, but there was a lot of blood. I've seen pictures of the ground afterwards. I actually have them. There's blood on the ground. There's blood on the house from where I sat up and leaned against the house.
So it went all
Um,
the way through then, obviously?
it no, it did
Oh,
not.
okay.
So the two of them, they went all the way through and then didn't break the skin on the back.
Okay.
So
All right. So you fire, strike him, he goes down. Walk us through what happens in that moment. Probably most of it becomes blurry at some point because but like how long does the EMS take? Do they go to him first? I'm hoping they go to you first to make sure you're okay. What does that all look like?
So he, after I shot him, after I saw him hit the ground, the other trooper, which I found out later, was in direct line of fire. So he was on the other side of him, is Trooper Monheim. And he said that he actually had his finger on the trigger and was in the process of pulling the trigger when I did. Um, so he falls on the ground. I laid back on the ground. Trooper Monheim comes over to me. Um, Trooper Dwayne Belargin had gotten there right at the same time. Dwayne came over to me. They started putting pressure on my chest. And I said to Dwayne, I'm like, I can't breathe. Like that was the first, and I probably was in pain too. That's not what I remember. I remember I couldn't breathe. My lung had collapsed. So it was filling with blood and collapsing. So Dwayne's putting pressure on my chest. Um, Ray Caldwell shows up. Um, Somebody walks by me
Who's
with,
I don't hey, who's forgive me.
sorry.
Who's Ray Caldwell? Is he a
So,
supervisor?
no, Ray was actually my senior man, and this was
Oh, you
his
did say
call.
that.
This
You
was
did
the
say
one
that.
that
That's
they
right.
were sending him to.
Apologize. Okay.
So that's okay. Somebody walked next to me that had BDUs on, blue BDUs. They're carrying a duffel bag and a shotgun. And I'm like, when the hell did the EMS guys start carrying shotguns? Like, that was my thought, right? It was Potsdam PD. They were putting pressure on my chest. Ray had showed up. EMS, they obviously heard me get shot, so they had sent the ambulances too. So they were there momentarily afterwards. Um, and somebody had started to go over to him, and Ray redirected them and said, no, you leave him, you go here first. So they came over to me first. Ray Ray's standing at my feet, and I said, I told him that he had to call my husband, which I didn't remember. I've read that in the report, but I did remember me telling him, you have to call my father. And he's like, okay. And I rattled my dad's number off to him, and he's like, you have to say it again. So I give him the number again, and the phone is ringing. And I said, but you can't talk to my mom. My mom can't be the one that finds out first. So it rings and rings and rings. He never gets them. My parents were actually into camp. They have a camp that's off grid. Um, so assessed me and decided that they had to just take me. So it was, they didn't do any stats or anything. They just loaded me on the gurney and they put me in the ambulance. And as they were taking me across the driveway, somebody said, "He's dead." And I heard, "She's dead." I said, "I'm not dead. I'm not fucking dead." They're talking about him. So they get me in the ambulance. Dwayne rides in the ambulance with me. And Ray's wife, I had just been pregnant. She had said to me when I was pregnant, "Take your wedding ring off because your fingers are going to swell and you don't want them to have to cut your ring off," because they had to cut my ring off when I was pregnant with one of my boys. So I'm in the ambulance and I said, "Dwayne, you have to take my wedding ring off." And he's like, and it's on my hurt arm. And he's like, "Mandy, I can't." I'm like, "You have to take it off. I don't want them to cut my wedding ring off." So he had to take my wedding ring off. Um, and I have a very high pain tolerance anyway, but if I'd ever been in pain, I just learned to kind of shut down, like close my eyes, breathe, that whole thing. So I'm laying there, ambulance ride. I mean, we're minutes from the hospital. And they're saying to me, "You got to open your eyes. Mandy, you got to wake up, talk to us." And I'm like, "I'm fine. Leave me alone. I'm just trying, to get
Yeah,
past this." Um, they got me to the hospital. My sister-in-law worked at the hospital. She was a lab tech there. So when they called and said they had a trooper that was shot, she came right down, saw it was me, called her husband. They lived like a mile and a half from us, and sent her husband over to get my husband, who was off work that day. Um, so Brad found out from his brother-in-law rather than a state trooper, because they didn't even have time to send somebody to go get him. Um, He got to the hospital. We live probably 20-ish or more minutes away from the hospital. He said he got there in less than 10.
I believe it.
Yeah, so he was there shortly after I got there. They had me in the emergency room. They had to cut my uniform off me. They were talking to me the whole time. I never lost consciousness again. Um, I had a collapsed lung. My scapula was broke. I have 2 broken ribs. The cartoid function, which is something in the shoulder, was also broke. And I had 2 holes in my chest. And I sent you a picture of it. The one hole where the first slug hit me was big enough to put a golf ball in.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it
It's hard.
was
It's hard
huge.
to size that in a picture. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So many people go through these. Well, not many people. Hardly anybody goes through incidents like this, but many people go through traumatic incidents and you know, are able to kind of like done over. Um, but that's not where it ends. So before we get into the rest of your story, what does your recovery and hospital stay look like? Like, what does that entail? You have all these injuries. Is it are they able to get you out on a relatively short time period, or do you have to significantly long stay at the hospital?
So the day that it happened, they had to give me blood in the ER. Canton Potsdam is not a trauma center. I don't think it had any trauma designation then. I think now it does a low level trauma. So they had to give me blood there. They had to stabilize me. Um, they put in a chest tube, which if nobody knows how they put the chest tube in, they make an incision between your ribs and literally jam a tube into your lung. Um, they did that. The first one didn't work, so they had to remove it and then do it a second time. And so my husband has always said, he goes, "When they did that the second time, I knew you were going to be okay." And after I watched the podcast with Rich and he was talking about being in so much pain, I said, "Brad, I said, I don't remember complaining about being in pain." I said, "I'm sure I was." And I said, what was I saying?" He goes, "You were literally saying nothing." He goes, "When you yelled," because I yelled at them, "when you yelled at them when they put the chest tube in," he goes, "that's when I knew you were going to be okay." He goes, "But you weren't saying anything before that." I said, "Oh,
Oh,
okay. Well, that makes sense now." Um, so they stabilized me, and then the state police helicopter had been in the area helping the sheriff's department with an investigation that they had going. So it landed at the local airport. They took me there, um, and they took me by helicopter to Burlington. Burlington, they had Dr. Bruce Crooks, who was teaching there because it's a teaching hospital. He had been an ER doctor at Miami-Dade, so he had seen hundreds of gunshot wounds. So I got very lucky that that's who was working. I spent the night in ICU, and the whole next day they took me out to a room. That was Monday, so like Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I think, and um, I was there for about a week. My lung wouldn't reinflate, so they were still pulling fluid and stuff out of it. I was there like 2 days, and the slugs were protruding out of my back. I had two lumps on my back. They took me in for surgery and cut those out. So I have the slugs. They were given to me later, so I have both of the slugs that were in my chest. Um, and there was a small piece of Kevlar because they had hit high enough. It was right where the Velcro is. So there
Yep.
was a very thin piece of the Kevlar, but it didn't stop it, which it
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have at
Yeah. Yeah.
that close range anyway.
So, Amanda, you're in this hospital, you're seeking treatment for the majority of the time you're there, but regardless of how long you're there, a week or so, you have downtime. And that downtime, do you recall thought processes like what's my life looking like here on, like, do you think to yourself, do I live a happy, healthy life after this? Tell me about how your brain works sitting there going
So
through this.
I am, you can't tell me I can't do something. And a couple of the doctors there had said, well, you're probably never going to work again, and that's not an option. That's not an option. I'm going back to work. It's just a matter of when. I remember the first time that I was able to get up and walk around, my arm just hung there. Like, you know how your arms swing? Mine didn't. It just hung there. And I said to my husband, I'm like, what am I going to do? He goes, it'll get better. It's just going to take time. So I don't think that I was worried about not going back to work then. That was, it might take time, but I was going to get there. So,
So you okay, so you had a pretty steadfast mind in that, like, I'm gonna get through this. This
right.
is just gonna be a stumbling block. I'll be good.
Yes.
Okay. You get out of the hospital approximately a week or so later. Recuperation PT, rest. What does that time period look like from the time you get out until obviously you go back to work at some period? If you want to just fill in that gap.
Yep. So I get out of the hospital the beginning of July. I had two holes in my chest. They sent me home. They weren't closed up. They wanted them to heal from the inside out. So the holes were open. They had to be packed with gauze, and then they were covered. And twice a day I had to um, take the bandage off and pull the gauze out. And you know how, like, when a band-aid sticks to your cut, that's what it was doing. It was pulling all of the bad tissue out. It was excruciating.
Oh,
Then the tape is, because I'm taking tape off multiple times a day, was tearing my skin. It was it was horrible. After about a week or so, my aunt's a nurse, and I went and I'm like, how does this look? Because I feel like it's not healing. And it wasn't. It was starting to get a little bit of an infection. So later in July, I went back. They debrided it, which is they go in and clean out all the dead tissue. And they ended up cutting the piece of skin between the two holes and making it one. So I have like a big fish hook scar. They closed the holes. And sent me home. So I start PT a few weeks after that. I was doing PT regularly 3 times a week. And things were getting better, but they still weren't great. I ended up having another surgery the following July, in July of 2008. And I was finally able to go back to work in October of 2008.
Full and strenuous. Is that
Yep,
yeah,
full
full
and
and strenuous.
strenuous.
So walk me through going back to work, how it feels, what happens, and lead us into the other courses of events that start taking place in your life.
Um, so I think longer it took, the more nervous I got to go back.
Sure.
Um, because then then you start getting in your own head, am I going to be able to do this? And once I was there, they made me ride with Ray, my FTO, again. So for the first day, I had to requalify because I'd been off for so long. So I rode around with him the first day. The second day back, I was, it was what it was. It was like I'd never been off. Um,
How's the dynamic at the station? How are something that I forgot to ask a few different people on podcasts. Rich was the only one that had such a significant injury similar to yours, but like, what's the reception like? How are you treated? And is it collective, or do you notice different types of feedback for when you return?
no, I had nothing but positive feedback when I came back.
Good.
Everybody was great. Um, Somebody came in, I think it was like a week or so afterwards, and I got sent on another domestic. He didn't even work out of our station. He's like, I started heading your way as soon as, and I was like, I was okay. Thank you
Yeah,
though. But, just a little more protective maybe at first.
yeah.
Nobody ever made me feel like I did anything wrong or that I was incapable. I should say that I actually had to go in front of a grand jury because in 2007, police shootings were still handled by the local DA's office. So I went to grand jury. Two people voted to indict me then. Um, yeah, yeah.
Really?
So, yeah, that was a little crazy. But I was no billed, so I don't ever have to worry about that again. But so, yeah, that was just a thing. So I get back to work. Go
It's
ahead.
it's no, that's a big thing. It's not a small thing. It's a pretty significant uh problem to go through at that time. Like, because your brain must be racing, right? You have to be like, what in the actual, you know what? Like,
Right,
right?
and being that technically I was the defendant, right?
Yeah,
They were bringing this stuff against
sure.
me.
Yep.
I wasn't required to testify, but I said, "No, I'm going. I'm not gonna let somebody else write my story. They're gonna hear exactly what happened from my point of view."
Yeah. Not only what, but
So,
why? What and why?
yeah,
Yeah, right? Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, I'm
because I
sorry.
mean, they had questions. Somebody's like, "Why did you go? Why didn't you wait for backup?" And it's
Yeah.
like that's not what we do. That's
Right.
not what we do. So,
Exactly.
um, yeah. So I go back to work. I go back in October of 2008. I was back to work a couple weeks, and the trooper that had switched with me, I don't know if you know the term touch hole relations, but that's something we use up here. So we have relatives in common. So my aunt was her cousin. And Lori's the one that switched with me the day that I got shot. Um, so we'd known each other for a while too. But we're working, and her son committed suicide while we were working. And I'd only been back to work a couple weeks. He was only 13. Just, one of those impulsive things that kids do, not realizing things aren't as bad as you think they are. Um, so that was the beginning of November. Um, and I don't want this to be like woe is me, but my PTSD is doesn't come from just my shooting,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize.
Yeah, that's why I asked you last night when we were going back and forth, and I felt silly asking it. But once you opened the box and showed me it, the shooting enough, is understandable for you to have PTSD. But now, as we move forward and everybody else will hear, it'll be blatantly obvious as to why you were suffering through these events. And it makes it so much more understandable for sure. Real quick, in regards to her son, like, how do you, it's while you guys are working. How do you find out about that? Is there,
So, she was working her house was on one post, so she always worked that post. I was working the other post. I heard 911 put out a call to local EMS, to head to whatever address, and I didn't know her address specifically. I knew, what town she was in. So I didn't really pay attention to it. I was pulling a car over, and as I'm calling out a service to pull the car over, um, the desk asked me what my location was, and I told them. And I get out and I get the person's information, and I get back in the car, and I'm writing the ticket, and I called in to Canton and I said, "Hey, why were you asking me my location?" And he's like, "Well, her son just killed himself." Like, "What?" So I went, I got out of the car, I threw the guy's information back at him. I'm like, "You're all set. Get out of here. I have an emergency." And I took off to her house. There was a ton of people there already when I got there. She had found out, um, because her other son was home, and he had headphones on, but he heard a noise, and he went and he actually found his brother and then called his mom. Well, I think he called 911 and they called Lori, and told her. And she was not far from the house, so she went right there too.
oof.
So, yeah, woof. It
So
was
that's so
rough.
that's but that's only one. So then
That's only one.
that's only one. So what happens then?
So that was November. My aunt, who is Lori's cousin, calls me in December and told me that she had stage 4 cancer, but she was going to fight it. Um, and I call these like everyday traumas because everyday people are going through this stuff. Mine just unfortunately was piled all on top of each other. Um, I always knew I was going to have PTSD. When I was off, I actually saw a counselor, but he was not effective for me. He was not what they call culturally competent. He hadn't worked with police a lot, so he
So
did not work for me.
did you see him while you were out of service from your injury,
Yes.
your initial
Yeah.
injury? And,
Yes.
so what? Obviously, something brought you to seek help in the first place. So what feelings? What happened specifically to bring you to that point? Like, what feelings were you having? What happened?
Um, so months after I was shot, my husband and I sold our house because our plan was to build a house. And if you've never built a house with your spouse, it's extremely stressful anyway.
Say no more.
I,
Say no
I,
more.
so we were building a house. We were living with my parents. By then, my son was a year old. So it was just a lot of change, a lot of stress. I wasn't working. My parents lived 45 minutes from us, so I was driving an hour to get to PT. Um, at some point, you quit sleeping. It just, you don't have a bad night of sleep, a bad night of sleep. It just starts becoming normal. So you don't really think anything of it. I was irritable. I don't really know what made me go see him. But I saw him for a few months and it didn't work for me. Not that he was bad, it didn't work for me. So,
If you're able, this is going to be uh, referencing all of the PTSD you suffered, and I want to circle back around and finish what you've been through. But this question's coming up now, and I think it's appropriate to ask. Um, when you have these feelings, you said you're very irritable. I don't know if that translates to lashing out, maybe doing some things you wouldn't normally do. Um, do you then have a sense of guilt for feeling that way? Is that now snowball into other feelings of why you're in this situation? How does that work for you in particular? Because it's very interesting.
So, um, I would be very irritable. Like, I would wake up in the morning angry. Um, and this was like the whole course, not just from right after it happened to when this other stuff started happening. My poor husband, I would wake up and just I'd be angry at him and short with him for no reason. I couldn't sleep. Um, Eventually I had this feeling almost like an elephant was sitting on your chest. It gets hard to breathe. Um, Things would like the kids when they scrunch one of those plastic water bottles, that noise would drive me insane. And it wasn't a please stop. It was instantly fly off the handle. Um, Things of that nature. Um, I remember the I remember getting that feeling in my chest, and I had a soda, and for whatever reason, the carbonation bubbles kind of just let it go. So I was like, "Oh, okay, now I can breathe a little bit better now." Um, the first time I remember having an anxiety attack was a week after my cousin had died. I was playing soccer. I came off the field and I was like, "Man, I'm like I can't breathe. My chest is tight." And somebody said, "Well, do you have anxiety?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Well, you might be having an anxiety attack. What's been going on?" I was like, "Oh my God." Okay, so I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm playing soccer in an event that had happened a few days before, which I mean, I'll tell you about that in a couple minutes, but yeah, I was having an anxiety attack and I didn't know what it was. It took somebody else to point that out to me. Um, I would I would be irritable. I started We didn't go out socially anymore. I couldn't be around people. It didn't matter who it was. Like people annoyed me. I didn't want to talk to people. Yeah.
Well, talking about the elephant in the room, you talked about elephant in your chest. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. Um, I, I you're still married, correct? To the same
I
guy.
am. I
So
am.
one of the things you mentioned more than one time was he's extremely patient with you. How I can't ask you because he would have to answer himself, but how do you think he brought himself to kind of maintain that patience? Obviously for love.
He was not patient. He was not patient.
Okay, okay, wrong. Or maybe a better word is how are you still together? How about that?
um, so we joke. Neither one of us are quitters. We don't like change. And we had two kids, so
Yeah.
we and we total joke, but we didn't get divorced because neither one of us wanted the kids in the divorce, is what we say. So, obviously that's not true, but we were there. We were there
Yeah.
multiple times, and it just neither. I mean, we love each other, and we just couldn't justify it because we went through. It seemed like every 3 to 4 months we were having these huge blowouts, and they just got worse every time. But neither one of us could really. We neither one of us would have pulled the trigger on that, and I can't explain why. He comes from a broken home. My parents have been married. I'm 47, so they've been married like 49 years. I think it'll be 50 in April. Um, my grandparents were married for 70 years, so I come from longevity in marriage. So it was never really a realistic option that we
Under
would have
yeah,
taken.
understood. So all right, let's get back to the events that molded you into who you are today after this incident. So your aunt was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
Walk me through the remainder and how does that happen? What happens with her?
Well, unfortunately, she ended up dying. But before that, so this was December 2008 that she was diagnosed. In February of 2009, I received a phone call from a gentleman. He was my brother-in-law's boss and said, I just got this really weird call from him. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you can reach out to him. My husband's a state corrections officer, and he was at work. Anytime anything goes wrong, my husband's usually at work. Whether, the power goes out or something stops working at the house. It snows 5 foot of snow and he's not here to plow. But so he was at work that day. And I called my brother in law and I'm like, what's going on? So and so just called me and he was contemplating suicide. He wouldn't tell me where he was. I was on the phone with him for 45 minutes. Talking to him. Let me know where you are, Chris. Let me come find you. Um, and I called him on my house phone. And on my cell phone, I dialed my sister in law's number, who I said, just lives down the road here. And her son answered. And I didn't talk to him. Now, this poor son, when I was pregnant the first time in August of 2006, end of August, beginning of September, Randy was blown up overseas. He lost his leg and his eye. So he answers the phone and he can hear me. And he's like, hey, Aunt Maddie. And I didn't answer him. And I'm talking to my brother in law and I'm like, Chris, you can't do this. You can't kill yourself. And I hear him go, Mom. And he hands the phone to my sister in law and she's listening to my conversation with her brother. And she races up to my house and she gets on the phone with him. And I called my husband at work. I don't know if you can get here in time, but this is what's going on. His jail was 55 minutes from our house. I get back on the phone with Chris. For 45 minutes, I tried to talk him out of it. And he finally told me where he was. He's like, I'm at the boat launch in Potsdam. I said, Chris, and he shot himself. I could hear the gunshot and I heard him make his final noise. Um, yeah, I felt so guilty. So guilty. He had a boy that was overseas in Afghanistan and there was nothing I could say to him. I'm like, wait until Brad gets home. Just wait until he gets here. You can talk to him. And he just,
S-
yeah.
Wow. So looking back, are there any indicators as to what put him in that mindset?
He was a state corrections officer. Um, he probably had around 20 or so years and he took a promotion and got himself into a little trouble and then ended up having to resign. And his life he ended up getting a divorce. His life just wasn't going the way he anticipated. And actually, the day that I was shot, so this had been going on for a couple years. The day that I was shot, my husband was outside mowing the lawn and he came inside and there's a message on the phone from a buddy that he worked with. And hey, I just heard what happened. Let me know if you need anything. I'm so sorry. And he thought his brother had killed himself. Then his brother in law shows up and it was something completely different. So we were worried it was going to happen, but Chris was 14 years older than Brad. So we didn't have the tools to help. We didn't know how to help. We were just, we're there. But it's not something that we talked about. But basically his life had just kind of spiraled.
So that's difficult in itself to get over. Again, another one that's difficult in itself to get over.
Another
So
one.
this is February 2009. Um, when do how before we get into, and it may tie in, but when do you finally do your complete separation from the state police? I know there's some in between there, so just let's
Um,
and if there's an overlap of another traumatic event within that time period, we can go over that, but I want to lock in your final departure from the state police
right.
as well.
So, that was February 2009. I got pregnant the beginning of May. I had complications with the pregnancy because of the blood transfusions. June of 2009, my aunt died the day after the anniversary of my shooting. I truly, honestly believe that she held on for one more day to not make my birthday that much more traumatic. I had to have my son 6 months early or 6 weeks early. I had him in December of 2009. He was born 6 weeks early. He was 6 pounds. He was healthy, but he wasn't. He had issues with his blood. He eventually needed to have a blood transfusion. He did that at 19 days old. Um, and I just remember I said to my husband, I'm like, man, I thought we were over this. I finally felt like my head was above water because I'd gone back to work. And when I got pregnant with him, I was so high risk, I had to immediately come off the road. So, whereas my first pregnancy, I was on the road as long as possible. I was climbing ladders, putting siding up a week before I was pregnant. This one, I couldn't do anything. I was so scared that I was going to cause a bleed, which would have killed him because my blood was going to attack him. I had him in December and I took 3 months off. I didn't come back to work until March of 2010. So um, all of this stuff had piled up. And the beginning of May, I was um, physically, I knew that I wasn't 100%. I know now looking back on it, a lot of it was mental too, because when I get anxious or upset or my mental health isn't good, physically I hurt more. Um, so I put in a memo asking to go light duty with the intention of getting back to the gym, working my shoulder, gaining my strength back. And I had gone in for an overtime detail on a Thursday. It was a Wednesday or a Thursday. I was on pass. I went in for an overtime detail. I turned the memo into the station sergeant. I went out and I was doing my overtime and I got called back in by the lieutenant. And I came in and she's like, "Hey, I see you put this memo in. You're off work." Like, what do you mean I'm off? I'm supposed to work the weekend. I'm working midnights this weekend. You can't just stick somebody the day before. No, you put this in, so you have to come off the road. But you can go out and finish your overtime shift, but then you're done. And I was just left in the lurch. That was the beginning of May. Um, the middle of June, towards the end of June, my mother calls me. And she's like, "Hey," so my mom was an EMT. They'd been out on a call, and the major and this lieutenant had come through the accident scene, recognized my mom, obviously, and start talking to her. And my mom's like, "Hey, did you know you're going back to work?" What? And she's like, hold on. Puts the lieutenant on. "Oh, yeah, we got your paperwork. You're going to come back to work. You're going to work light duty. We don't have everything worked out, but we put your retirement papers in for you." Yeah, that's exact. I was like, this is wrong, but I shouldn't have to be finding out from my mother. My mother shouldn't know before I know.
Yeah.
So, um, I ended up going back to work light duty the end of June. But I worked, like I said, I worked in zone headquarters. There was a desk. There was a senior investigator. We had a whole investigative unit. They couldn't find a spot for me. So I had to go to troop headquarters, which was an hour and a half drive from my house, 5 days a week. So I drove there from June to October. And finally, in October, they were able to get me back to zone headquarters. And I worked from zone until they officially retired me in June of 2011 or January. I'm sorry, January of 2011.
Uh, so there's more this isn't funny, but there's more traumatic events in your life. So you retire in January 2011. What other events that put you where you are at today happened? Whether I forgive me because I forget the timeline of the other events, but if you could just fill in some gaps and just move forward on that.
Uh,
I probably will have some more questions, but just go ahead with that.
yeah, the majority of them happened in that time frame. My cousin, I think I don't remember if I had said this earlier, but my cousin had a car accident 2 months after my shooting, and he was paralyzed. and it was his mother that got cancer and his mother that died. And he eventually committed suicide as well. Um, he cut his wrists, he cut his legs, and he attempted to cut his throat. So he bled out in the chair that he had been sitting in. And my husband and I went and took care of the chair so my other cousin and my uncle didn't have to deal with that. I just kind of absorbed that. And it was that week that happened, I believe, on a Monday. And um, that happened the very next day. My son was 5 or 6, and I had coached his T-ball team. And 3 siblings that were on that team, their older brother committed suicide. And I was playing soccer that night, and that's when I had my first anxiety attack that I can actually pinpoint. Um, so then things just kept, snowballing. Alcoholism runs down my mom's side of the family. So I was a drinker in college. I mean, I had a good time in college, but I never really drank after I turned 21. I mean, we'll go out, we'll have a couple drinks, but I don't drink every day. I drink maybe once a month, I'll have a beer or two. So I consciously never started drinking because I was worried it would become a problem. But I just kept pushing stuff down and ignoring stuff. Like, I'm very good at ignoring my physical pain, but when my physical pain is really bad, then everything is really bad. I'm, a lot shorter, grumpier, harder to be around. So, yeah.
Um, well, there's still more, but what? So then, how do you get to the point? What's your I guess what's your tipping point? Like, at what point are you just?
So this went on for a long time. I reached out to my general practitioner, my PA, and said, okay, I need something. Whatever I'm doing is not working. I had seen the one counselor who did not work for me. I tried a second one. The first one told me to meditate. I don't know if you've ever tried to meditate, but one of the things they tell you to do is you've got to count your breaths. And when I do that, I stop breathing because I'm concentrating on counting. It didn't work for me. He tried the EMDR, which is the eye movement, which is very, very effective. It just did not work for me. The second counselor that I went to told me to go on vacation without my husband. I only saw him about twice. And then I just gave up. I was like, obviously, nobody can help me. So I asked my doctor to put me on medication, and I went on Cymbalta, and I went on a low dose of it, and it helped. But I was not getting. I would get up and get my kids ready for school. I'd put them on the bus, and I'd go back to bed for 2 or 3 hours. Um, I was functioning, but I wasn't living. I was just kind of a shell. Go ahead.
Yeah, good call. Good call. This is gonna be a tough one. So, going through all this, do you think this period of time in your life affected your children in an adverse way? And if so, please explain, because only because of how you're explaining it and how you were going through these moments, um, it had to have some effect on your relationship. You already talked a little bit about with your husband, but how about with the children?
Um, I think it did. So I didn't even I couldn't be touched. Having my husband hug me, touch me, it put me on edge. Even having the kids hug me. I mean, they didn't get to have birthday parties at the house. My youngest is a December baby. I can't have a house full of kids. Just the noise. They can have kids in the summer over where they're outside, they're playing in the pool, but I can't be in a room with all the noise. So they didn't get to have birthday parties like everybody else does. My oldest can get very short sometimes. He doesn't really know how to convey his feelings without anger and being loud. And I think he learned that from me. Um, But at the same time, they had the benefit of having me here all the time. I didn't work. They didn't, they weren't raised by a babysitter or a grandparent. So I think that
Sure.
they benefited greatly that way.
Yep.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Um,
I can see that for sure.
yeah.
Um, so you're seeking, you go on this medication and you say that it does help to some extent. What's the shelf life on that, and what does moving forward look like for you then after at that point?
So I was on it for, I don't know, maybe a year or two, and I started to notice that it wasn't helping as much anymore. And I'm like, well, I don't want to take more of this. So
Yeah.
I did the only logical thing I could do, and I quit taking it altogether.
Cold turkey. I love
So,
it.
cold turkey. Um, which I later found out is a big no-no. I guess there's like a ton of side effects. But we were on vacation in Florida and it's sunny out and we were doing stuff. I had like a dizzy feeling that whole week that I first quit taking it. But other than that, I didn't have side effects. I get home, I'm talking to my cousin. I'm like, oh, I quit taking this. And she's like, you can't do that. She's like, there's all these side effects. She goes, I actually quit taking it myself and I'm getting brain zaps. And I'm like, well, I'm not having any of that stuff. So I guess I'm doing okay. So I just muddled through life for a while. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. I said we were watching a show one night and that SEAL team show, and whatever episode it was, one of the guys was having PTSD and he broke down and he's like, I just feel broken. And I'm like, wow, that's how I feel. I'm broken. And that's kind of how I describe it now, is like I was a plate that got thrown on the floor and broken into all these pieces. And I swept them all together and I glued them all back together. And then this happened and a piece fell out. And then I tried to put it back, but it doesn't stay. So the pieces keep falling out. It was just never complete again. And I was just muddling through life. Like uh, some of these fights that we would have, and he would be like, are you happy? And I'm like, I'm not unhappy, but I don't remember what happy feels like anymore. I
Yeah.
just am. And in 2021, we had two troopers shot in the Binghamton area, Becky Seeger and Ryan Thorpe. They were shot 2 weeks apart. And it was shortly before that somebody on Facebook in the retired site had said, hey guys, what do you think about, we start our own little thing when our troopers go through something we've been through, we figure out how to reach out to them and just talk to them. I'm like, absolutely, I would do that. And it was literally like a couple weeks later when Becky got shot. So I was put in contact with her, and I was talking to her over the course of a couple weeks, and then Ryan got shot, and they put me in contact with Ryan, and I was talking with him. And my husband said to me, you can't do this anymore. And I'm like, you don't tell me that, first of all. That doesn't, I mean, and I said, what do you mean? Why? He goes, you're not okay. After you are having these conversations with them, you are not okay anymore. So I was getting more agitated and more, and I don't let things go. I hold it in. So it's all just gets pushed down. And I said, well, this isn't an option because unfortunately I went through this shooting. I had to deal with getting booted out of the state police. Um, they did me a favor. They didn't do me a favor. It just depends on the day how I feel about that. But so I started looking into, okay, what can I do so they don't affect me as much? Because I mean, I can talk just the same way I am right now with you, with them, but it's the afterward. So I started looking into different things. And I found a program, an organization. It's called NILEAP. It's the New York Law Enforcement Assistance Program. And I reached out, and in May of 2022, they got me into one of their 3-day seminars in Watertown. And I went there thinking I was going to learn tools to help me help other people. And it helped me realize just how bad off I actually was at the time. and there was another trooper that was sitting there next to me. Um, he was had just got into EAP, and he goes, "Hey, I know this counselor. Let me see if I can get you hooked up with her." And we left there on Wednesday, and I had my first counseling appointment that Friday. I had to drive an hour and a half to get there, but um, River Hospital in Alexandria Bay has a program that is specific. It was started for the Fort Drum soldiers, and it's specific to Fort Drum soldiers, and they take on law enforcement. And it's a PTSD program. The best way to describe it is it was a 12-step program that took me 2 years to get through. Like you worked on something every week, and it brought out things that I didn't even know that I was harboring. So my life gradually started getting better. I reached back out to the NILEAP program, and NILEAP was started by Jim Banish. He is a retired deputy, and his brother was on our job, Lieutenant Joe Banish, and he committed suicide in 2008. And Jim went through a whole thing and eventually started this program that now helps hundreds of first responders. And it's all volunteer, and it's free to any first responder that wants to participate. So I had free training to become a peer, and now I attend multiple PCISs, which are post critical incident seminars, a year. So I actually have one the ninth that I'm going to attend. So that also helps me, kind of keeps my keel a little even.
So, how would you today, sitting here in February of 2026, how would you um evaluate yourself and how much you've grown since the incident up to now, and do you still feel like there's room for improvement, or are you kind of, do you feel like you're at your plateau? I kind of have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but it's an interesting question nonetheless.
Yeah. Um, I am 100% better than I was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I mean, you got to throw in COVID was in there too. So
Yeah.
now these kids that are loud and rambunctious are home forever. We didn't have our sports programs and stuff going on. Um, yeah, I get up. I still don't sleep well. I take supplements to help me sleep. I don't take prescription drugs for any of that stuff. Um, So I still have trouble sleeping. If I have trouble sleeping, then my body hurts more, so I'm more irritable, but I can recognize it now where um if I kind of snarl at my husband, I can pull it back and apologize. I don't always apologize because that's hard for me. Um but yeah, way better. I participate in the PCISs. We go out, we do more things. I had been in counseling for a year, and I finally went to a concert that had 10,000 people with my kids. So it just everything like I was always able to kind of pull myself back from having an anxiety attack. I'd never had really a full blown one. Like I could recognize that my chest was tight so I could, do whatever I needed to do to bring that down, but I have more tools now. An example, two examples. August of 24, 23. Now I don't remember exactly. There was a shooting involving a trooper up here. He was not hurt. He actually, and you should talk to him. He's a great guy, Connor Sutton. Um, we had a guy who was sentenced for attempting to murder his girlfriend. He took a plea, but then didn't report for sentencing. It was kind of on the lam, and it's in my general area. The shooting happened where I walk almost every day. Um, and the original report that came out on Facebook was that a trooper had been shot. So I was getting anxious and more anxious and more anxious. And I ran I went up to my friend's house who works for local PD, and they have an app that tells you what's going on. And she was able to say, "Okay, no, the trooper's fine." And I later found out who it was, but I had the tools so I could bring myself back down so it didn't affect me for days afterwards. And the other incident was the weekend that my husband retired. So he retired on the 16th of June. Um, and we had a get together for him. So he was under the weather for a couple days. That was on the 16th of June. We had a trooper shot. I believe it was the 17th. Maybe it was the 16th too, but down on 87, the guy shot out the van at him.
Yep.
He, I,
Yep.
so they released a still shot of the guy shooting out of the car. So it pops up on the computer, and that's all I saw was the barrel of this gun. And it
Yep.
was in the afternoon, and all afternoon I was getting more and more antsy and uptight. And my husband went to bed at 8 o'clock because he didn't feel good. And I tried to go upstairs and go to bed at like 10, I think. And I laid down and I just started sobbing. And I am not a crier. I didn't say that, but when I was shot, I never cried. Not once. I never shed a tear. Um, my mom and my sister are the emotional females in our family. And when they walked into the hospital, I looked at them and said, if you're gonna cry, you have to leave. You can't do that in here. I'm not a crier.
No.
Um, and I'm laying in bed and I'm sobbing. And I don't want to wake him up because he's sick, you know? So I came back downstairs and I was downstairs for 2 or 3 hours and I calmed myself back down. And I went back upstairs. And as soon as I laid down, it just hit me again and sobbing again. And I finally had to wake him up, which scared the hell out of him because I don't wake him up and I certainly don't cry. And before I had had all this, I wouldn't have known what was the trigger. So I wouldn't have been able to talk about it with him. I wouldn't have bothered him. I would have just stayed downstairs the whole time. Um, and I would have carried it for days afterwards. Like it would have affected me for days afterwards. Um, Room for growth, absolutely. Like I look at it like a recovering alcoholic. I need to find a term for it because it's like complete like healing. I'll still always be healing.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I had to have surgery on my shoulder. Well, I had another one in 2013. I had to have the bicep tendon cut and moved. And I just had another surgery in September um, to have more work done. It's like a continual thing and it gets overwhelming, but I have the tools to deal with it now, thankfully, because of the NILEAP program.
So I have two specific questions. One, what do you think was the catalyst in you being able to identify these feelings or triggers that got you to the point where you knew something was coming? And then how is that? How did where did that transition come from once you identified it to being able to at least have some type of outlet? Is that all through the NILEAP, you believe?
Um, I think that's part of it. It helps me recognize it. Obviously, the 2 years of counseling that I went through, I had the most phenomenal counselor. She was this small, fiery redhead. So, I mean, you go to counseling, you think it's kind of stuffy, and it's all what happened in your childhood. It was none of that. And she'd swear in our sessions. Like I'd be talking to her and she's like, "What the fuck?" And the first time she said it, I was like, "Whoa, are you allowed She's like, "Yeah, I'm allowed to say that." I'm like, "Okay, you're my people."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just um that certainly helps. Um, I find myself I get very easily angered. I think most of us do just because of the profession we're in. Um, when criminals aren't held accountable, but I've learned to not let like go off the deep end with it. Um the guy that shot me had a lengthy criminal history. He had started getting arrested in 1980. He had done 2 prison bids for raping an underage girl and molesting his stepdaughter. He was not a nice person whatsoever.
How old was he? This gentleman? This man? This
40
this
something. I don't
this
remember exactly.
this asshole? Sorry, I say it out loud.
Yeah.
Jackson,
That's what I call
I
him.
call
I
him
called him
gentleman for some reason. I don't know
yeah.
why. I apologize.
No, I called him I was in the ambulance and I was saying that fucker better be dead. That fucker better be dead. So I called him lots of names, but
Understandably so. Yep.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, and I think being able, like, I didn't have purpose for a long time. I mean, I raised my kids, but I was that was never my goal in life to be a stay-at-home mom, so I really struggled with that, and it wasn't my choice. I am a type A personality. I have to make the choices, the decisions, um, and when that control was taken from me, like, that was bad for a long time.
I bet. So I lied. I said two more questions. I now have two more questions. So because you mentioned something with your children, um, when the incident happened, they were one wasn't born and one was very young, correct? So
Correct.
at what age and how do you tell them of the incident and what happened? And how does that go?
I don't know. I feel like the younger one always knew. Um, Kyle was 8 months old when I was shot. And then it was within the next year and a half that his uncle died. And his grandmother told him, his paternal grandmother, and I was like that when he was 4. I was like, he doesn't need to know that.
Yeah,
But I have a huge scar here, so I feel like they probably always knew, just the maybe not all the
yeah.
specifics. One of
Have you
them
ever
just snuck one of
have
them
you ever
snuck
sat
down here
down?
and has been
Yeah.
sitting here listening.
Oh,
So
so if he didn't know, he knows now.
yeah, well, it's funny because there's a lot of things that people don't know, and I still glossed over it. He shot me with the double loaded 50 caliber black powder rifle. When he went in the house, he had a 12 gauge black powder rifle that was what he brought out the second time he came out, that he attempted to shoot me with, and it misfired. He was back inside the house loading the first one. Um, there's lots of like little things that people don't know.
Sure.
They know that I was shot, but they don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shit. Just listen to the past hour that we talked and about what happened to you. Because before I talked to Rich, your event, no offense, was just a brush. You know what I mean? It was a very broad
Yeah.
brush that I knew very little about. And when I spoke with Rich, I don't know if you remember, one of the things he was relatively close to me when that incident happened. And one of the things our job does and has a knack for doing is putting a lid on events like this because I don't know why. Like, I don't know why. I mean, for some, maybe you don't want it to be a traumatizing event, but like, I would like to know personally. Like, give me some details on why, how. Maybe this could prevent me from it happening to me or some of the guys and girls that I'm working with, right?
Right.
Education is key. Um, my last question is based on all this trauma that you've been through and this healing that you've obviously allowed yourself to go through. What, if anything, advice do you have for any first responder? We could specify it to troopers, doesn't matter though for me. Any first responder that may have suffered similar, or it doesn't even have to be similar because we all are affected differently from trauma events. So, an event in which they would determine to be a traumatic event, what advice would you give to someone?
So my biggest advice is I got shot. I knew I was going to have PTSD, right? It was just a matter of when, how bad it was going to be. Um, and I never had flashbacks. I didn't have nightmares. I didn't have any of that. It showed up in other ways. And it's different for everyone. And everyone, I don't want people to look at me and be like, her situation is way worse than what I went through, because it's not. Because to me, the cumulative is just as bad as one major one because I can recognize that, yeah, I'm going to have PTSD. Um, but when you go and you're on this fatal of a child, or, you had to listen to somebody recount their sexual abuse, like those are all traumas that you take in and they weigh on you cumulatively. So you might not think that you have PTSD because it's not historically what you think of it, but you still have all of the symptoms and the stuff that happens. For first responders, our divorce rates are sky high. Um, I know multiple people that have had multiple divorces. I probably know more people that have been divorced than have stayed with their spouse. Um, and that's for all, like across the board. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, as a female, I was like, okay, so I was always I was brought up in a household where you didn't cry. You got it done. It was what it was. Um, but don't be afraid of those feelings and be able to recognize them to work through them because little things start getting bigger and bigger. If you aren't sleeping at night and you need a drink to go to bed, but then it's 3 drinks and then I mean it all just accumulates, right? And it makes everything worse when we don't take care of ourselves. I mean, it's the same as if you don't take care of yourself physically, your body suffers.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the mind makes everything. I highly encourage anyone, if you're having any, trouble sleeping, anxiety, you're short with your spouse, you're not having you're having trouble at work, you're calling into work. I mean, there's such a wide range of symptoms for PTSD that don't include just nightmares. Um, Find somebody competent. There's resources out there. Start with NILEAP. There's the Western, I think it's called the Western Helpline in the western part of the state. They're phenomenal too. There's different organizations. A lot of people don't want to seek out the EAP in their agencies because they're worried about stuff getting sent back.
The
I think places are
stigma,
better. Yeah, there's a
stigma, right?
stigma, right?
Yep.
And being a female, like females are emotional and we can't handle. I mean, I was never treated like a girl. Like couldn't do it because I was a female. I never experienced that when I was working, but I think it's still always in the back of your mind. So I didn't reach out for help. I kind maybe it's not fair, but I kind of feel like maybe somebody should have recognized that I was going through something, and rather than maybe they thought they were doing me a favor throwing my retirement papers in on my behalf. They weren't, but maybe somebody thought that. I think there was better ways. You obviously can't make somebody go get help, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What about a conversation, right? What about a sit down and like actually evaluating where you are mentally, where you want to be, what your aspirations are to lead you up to this point, instead of just saying, "Hey, by the way, like you're
Well, I
you're
mean, I mean, now I can look back and say and be like that, right? I know people that have gone through stuff and I reach out to them and it can't be because you always get pushback. Nope, I'm fine. Everything's good. Um, but like my PTSD didn't materialize right away. Some people's do. Mine didn't. So by the time that I realized that I was in the mire, like I was in it and I
yeah,
didn't know how to find my way out. And by then I was already out of the state police, and you're not out of sight, out of mind to your friends, but you're out of sight, out of mind to the state police. They're done. They're done with
yep,
you. And I kind of feel like I got lost and I didn't really know how to find my way back. And if I come across people now, I'll continually reach out to them, and not every day, not every week, but just to check in, even a month down the line, 2 months. Like, how are you doing now?
yeah,
Has anything changed? So
yeah. That's very important. Just checking in on people, just so because you never know. That one check in could be the one moment where they may say, "Hey, can we just have a conversation?" And that could change the trajectory of their life. So that's
Yeah, I mean,
very,
and I hope things are different with the state police now. The trooper that was on scene, um, that almost pulled the trigger, it's amazing. So I've reached out to different people throughout the years, and I reached out to him, and he came over. He helped take care of me. He cleared the house. He was on scene until like 7:30, 8 o'clock that night. And a senior trooper looked at him and said, "You have blood on your uniform. Why do you have blood?" Like, didn't know that he had been there. "Why do you have blood on your uniform?" And he's like, "I was here with Mandy." So now you're talking 3 hours later. Nobody had taken care of him. He had 6 months on the job. 6 months.
oh, Jesus.
The next day, because we were on our first of two, the next day we had security on the power dam up here. Somebody thought they were doing him a favor, didn't send him on the road to answer complaints. They put him on the dam, a 12-hour shift in a car by himself doing nothing, to sit and just sit in what he had.
And
What are we
stew
doing?
and stew
Yeah,
over
and
the
just
last what
stew.
happened yesterday. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, now I know they do offer people a couple days off. Hopefully, they really go through with this, giving people significant time off. And I mean, it really shouldn't have been just for me. Obviously, I had to take time off, but this other trooper that was directly involved in it, I mean, you got to take care of them, because otherwise we lose them, and we lose them in
yeah,
horrific ways. So
yeah. Very true. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on. There's a lot of anticipation for this episode. You have a ton of supporters. Holy
yeah.
shit, by the way. That is
Well,
awesome.
hopefully I didn't disappoint anybody.
No, I don't think there's any way possible. You were very upfront, open, honest, transparent. I couldn't have asked for a better interaction with you. I deeply appreciate your time. I feel so guilty not knowing your story, but now that I do, it sets my brain up a little bit differently. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words?
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
People are anticipating this, and I hope that it helps somebody, not just hearing the bad part of my story, but where it got to be good. And I guess the biggest thing is I didn't get real help until I was 14 years after my incident. So it doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 14 years, 20 years. If you can get help, your life will improve.
Awesome. Mandy, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you
Every
for having me.
Yes, everybody that's listening still, please like and share, especially this episode. Please share this episode so that people can get some feedback and they can get some actual uh life experience as to what it's like going through these traumatic events. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.